podcast where we react to everything and anything. And today we're going to be diving deep into one of hip-hop's most iconic tracks, Tupac's Dear Mama. We've got the lyrics from letras.com and the song's Wikipedia page ready to unpack it all.
Yeah, the song's not just a hit, it's a cultural touchstone. It gives us a raw look at poverty addiction and that complex bond between a mother and son.
For sure. And right away, one thing that grabs you in the lyrics is Tupac's honesty. He doesn't sugarcoat anything, his rough childhood, or his mom's struggles, or even his own mistakes.
And it's fascinating how he balances that honesty with deep respect. You know, look at the lines, and even as a crack fiend mama, you always was a black queen mama. He's acknowledging the reality, but still elevating his mother, celebrating her strength. It's more than just biography. It speaks to that larger cultural image of the strong black mother.
Yeah, and the Wikipedia entry adds context to that. It highlights how common single mothers were and still are in black communities and all their struggles, especially during the crack epidemic. It helps us understand why Dear Mama resonated so deeply with so many.
Absolutely. He tapped into a shared experience. But he also did something crucial for hip-hop. He brought vulnerability to a genre that's often associated with bravado.
Which is interesting because the lyrics are so personal, but the Wikipedia article says he wrote the song right before going to prison. So there's this added layer knowing he was facing time apart from his mother.
And then there's that story about him calling Jada Pinkett Smith to share the song because he knew she'd relate to it, because of her own mom's struggles. It shows how personal this was for him, seeking that connection through his music.
It wasn't just about making a hit, it was deeper than that. But speaking of hits, the song topped the Billboard charts, went platinum, and it's in the Library of Congress now.
Yeah.
Like, this wasn't just personal, it had massive cultural impact.
Yeah, and it really paved the way for artists like Eminem and Kendrick Lamar, to express vulnerability in their music. Dear Mama challenged hip-hop's norms. It showed that honesty about a mother's love could resonate with everyone.
Didn't Kendrick Lamar say something about how Dear Mama inspired him to embrace vulnerability in his music? Something about realizing that honesty isn't weakness.
Yes. He said that Dear Mama taught him the value of being open even in a genre known for swagger. He saw that it wasn't weak to express feelings, particularly about family. But, this raises a question. While vulnerability is powerful, do you think the focus on his mother's struggles might unintentionally reinforce certain stereotypes about black mothers always being burdened? It's a tricky balance.
That's a good point. It's celebrating resilience, but it also risks perpetuating that narrative of struggle. Maybe that's part of why the song continues to spark conversation. But before we go too deep into the cultural impact, I want to circle back to the lyrics themselves. There's a line in the first verse that really struck me. I shed tears with my baby sister. Over the years, we was poorer than the other little kids. And even though we had different daddies, the same drama, when things went wrong, we'd blame mama. It's like this vivid picture of their shared experience with poverty.
Absolutely. Yeah, it highlights the instability many kids, especially in marginalized communities, face. But it's interesting, that sense of guilt. Blaming their mother when she was doing her best, their self-awareness there, acknowledging his childhood perspective without excusing it.
Right, and he doesn't shy away from his own missteps later on. He raps, I moved out and started really hanging. I need money of my own, so I started slanging. I ain't guilty because even though I sell rocks, it feels good putting money in your mailbox. It's complicated because he's admitting to doing wrong, but also justifying it as providing for his mother. What do you make of that?
It's a stark look at the choices people make when they're just trying to survive in poverty. He's trapped in this cycle, feeling obligated to help his mother, even through crime. It speaks to that complex bond, trying to earn love and respect that he feels he lacked. But I'm curious, do you find this justification convincing, or does it feel more like a flawed attempt to rationalize his actions? Because I'm leaning towards the latter.
I see your point. There's definitely some internal conflict there. He's trying to make amends, but the way he's doing it is problematic. And it makes you think about the cycle of poverty. It's not just a personal struggle, it's a systemic issue. But, okay, we need to pause here for now. We've got a lot more to cover, from the tender moments of his mother's care to the musical elements that make the song so powerful. We'll pick this back up in the next part of our deep dive.
Picking up where we left off, that contrast between those harder moments and the tender ones, it's striking. Think about that verse where he raps. And I could see you coming home after work late. You're in the kitchen trying to fix us a hot plate. You just working with the scraps you was given. And Mama make miracles every Thanksgiving. We're seeing a different side of their relationship now.
It's such a vivid image.
Yeah.
Her resilience just shining through, even with limited resources. It makes those miracles every Thanksgiving feel even more meaningful.
And it plays into this theme that runs through so much of Tupac's work, acknowledging his mother's sacrifices. Like, he's trying to repay a debt that he can never really settle.
Which goes back to that guilt he expressed earlier. Blaming her when they were kids. He's older now and he understands more of the context of her struggles.
Right, and by showing both the hardship and the love, the song becomes even more relatable. It's not this romanticized view of motherhood, it's an on-healed one.
Okay, there's one more line I want to talk about before we move on from the lyrics. Towards the end, Tupac raps, "And even though I act crazy, I gotta thank the Lord that you made me. There are no words they can express how I feel. You never kept a secret, always stayed real." It feels like the culmination of everything he's been trying to say.
It's the culmination of his vulnerability. He's stripping away that tough exterior and expressing pure gratitude for his mother's support. It's powerful because it suggests that even amidst his crazy actions, he recognizes her positive influence.
And it reinforces that transformative power of a mother's love, right? Like it helped him become the man he is, even with his flaws.
For sure. It reminds us that unconditional love can be a guiding force even when we mess up. But it's worth noting that not every listener is going to connect with that religious part. Some might find it a little strange in a song that's also dealing with such harsh realities.
That's true. It shows the song's complexity, how it can resonate on different levels for different people depending on their background. But we've talked a lot about the lyrics, and we haven't even gotten to the music itself. The Wikipedia entry says that it samples Sadie by the Spinners and In All My Wildest Dreams by Joe Sample. I'm curious to hear your take on those choices.
Well, both samples are from the soul genre, which is interesting because it already creates this contrast with Tupac's rap style.
It's like the music is doing something that the lyrics can't do on their own.
Right.
Like adding this layer of warmth and nostalgia.
Exactly. And All My Wildest Dreams in particular has this melancholic beauty that contrasts with the honesty in Tupac's verses. It's almost as if the music is trying to soothe the pain in his words.
And the way the beat slows down during the chorus. It's like this moment of reflection, emphasizing how important the message is.
Yeah, it's a great use of dynamics. It lets those backing vocals saying, "Lady, don't you know we love ya," really sink in. It's like everyone is affirming a mother's love, adding even more weight to the song. But I do wonder if choosing to sample these particular tracks, while effective, might also romanticize the past a little. Soul music evokes a certain time period. And while that adds to the song, it could also overshadow the present-day realities Tupac is talking about.
You're right, the nostalgia could distract from the message. And that's part of what makes it so interesting to break down.
Yeah.
It's not a simple song. It makes you think critically about everything. It's saying,
Yeah.
okay, but before we get too philosophical, I want to go back to something you said earlier about how the song was produced. The Wikipedia article mentions that the producer Tony Pizarro had been pushing Tupac to make Dear Mama its own track. And Tupac recorded the vocals in one take. That's incredible.
It really shows how much emotion he brought to the studio that day. It wasn't planned out or anything. It was pure emotion. And that's something you can hear in his voice. It's almost like he's talking to his mom.
Which makes it even more impactful, knowing he was about to go to prison. It adds another layer of meaning to his words.
Right. It reminds us that art often comes from personal experience, and sometimes the most powerful art comes from moments of vulnerability. But that makes me think, how much should knowing about an artist's life affect how we understand their work? It's an ongoing debate, especially now with social media.
That's a great question to think about as we move into the last part of our deep dive. We talked about the lyrics, the music, and some of the context, but we haven't explored the full impact of Dear Mama on hip-hop and culture. And I'm really curious to hear what you think about how the song has changed over time. Stay tuned.
So about that legacy. Dear Mama didn't just change how people saw hip-hop. It opened a door for artists to be more real.
Exactly. The Wikipedia article talks about how much it influenced rappers. Eminem, Kendrick Lamar, Drake. They've all said that Dear Mama made them feel like it was okay to be vulnerable in their music.
It's wild how a song that's so specific to a time and place became universal. It challenged that whole idea that hip-hop had to be tough.
And it's still relevant. I mean, the song is in the Library of Congress. That's not just a popular song, that's history.
For sure. It says so much about America, poverty, addiction, family struggles. But it also something about human connection, that need for a mother figure.
But could that focus on the mother figure be limiting in a way? Like, it's great, but does it put mothers on this pedestal and ignore how complicated real families are?
That's a good point. It's celebrating resilience, but it could also play into that stereotype of the strong Black mother who's always sacrificing. It's not that simple.
And maybe that's why people are still talking about this song. It starts conversations about family stereotypes, what it means to be vulnerable when everyone tells you to be tough.
It's a reminder that even art that feels personal can have a big impact. And music, especially something like Dear Mama, with personal stories and social commentary, it can be really powerful.
Okay, before we go too broad, I want to bring it back to something you said earlier about how much an artist's personal life should influence how we see their work.
Yeah,
It's a tough one, right?
it is. Knowing Tupac's life adds something to Dear Mama. But does it make us excuse his flaws? Does it blind us to problems with the message? It's a conversation we need to have.
Especially now when fans see so much of artists' lives on social media, it's all blurred.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. How do you balance the personal and the artistic? When you hear Dear Mama, what stands out? The emotion, the context, the music itself. Let that guide how you see it.
That's a great point. And as always, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. The podcast sponsors in the description below, so go and check them out. Thanks.